The wind howled across the empty plains like a wounded animal, dragging dust across the earth in long, restless waves. The land stretched endlessly, dry, cracked, and forgotten, just like the people who passed through it. No one stopped here. No one cared to. Except one man. The lone cowboy rode slowly along the ridge, his horse stepping carefully over uneven ground. His hat cast a long shadow over his face, hiding the sharp lines of a man who had seen too much and trusted too little. Folks in nearby towns called him many things, drifter, ghost, outlaw, but none of them knew his real name anymore. And he preferred it that way. Silence was his companion. Until he heard it. A faint sound. Not the wind. Not an animal. A voice. Help. The cowboy's grip tightened on the reins. His horse shifted uneasily beneath him. He listened again. Please. It was barely there. Broken. Weak. Like it didn't belong in the world anymore. He turned the horse. Down the slope. Toward the sound. What he found stopped him cold. A girl lay half buried in dust and dried blood. Her dress was torn, stained dark with dirt and violence. Her face, bruised, swollen, barely recognizable. One arm twisted unnaturally beneath her, her breathing shallow, uneven. She wasn't supposed to still be alive. But she was. The cowboy dismounted slowly, his boots crunching against gravel as he approached. He'd seen death before, plenty of it, but this was different. This wasn't a gunfight. This wasn't survival. This was cruelty. He crouched beside her. Her eyes fluttered open for just a second. Clouded. Distant. But alive. Don't leave. He didn't answer. He just moved. Carefully, he lifted her into his arms. She was lighter than she should have been, fragile, like something already halfway gone. His jaw tightened, but his hands remained steady. He carried her to the horse and mounted behind her, holding her in place as he turned back toward the only place he called home. A small cabin. Miles away from anyone who could help. Or harm. The ride took hours. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in burning orange as the cowboy pushed his horse harder than usual. The girl drifted in and out of consciousness against him, her body trembling with every step. Once, she whispered something. They said. I wouldn't last. He didn't ask who they were. He already knew. Men like that existed everywhere. Towns protected them. Fear fed them. And people looked the other way. Not this time. Not anymore. The cabin stood alone at the edge of a thin forest, weathered wood, worn but strong. Smoke hadn't risen from its chimney in days. Until now. The cowboy carried her inside and laid her gently on the bed. The room was simple, just a table, a chair, a stove, and a life built on quiet solitude. He wasn't used to company. Especially not like this. He worked quickly. Water boiled. Cloth torn. Old supplies brought out, some he hadn't used in years. His hands moved with surprising care as he cleaned the wounds, wiping away blood and dirt. She didn't wake. Not fully. But she winced. That was enough. It meant she was still fighting. Night fell. The wind outside grew louder, rattling the cabin walls, but inside, there was something else now. Warmth. Life. The cowboy sat in the chair beside the bed, watching her breathe. Slow. Uneven. But steady enough. For now. He hadn't planned for this. Hadn't asked for it. But he wasn't turning away. Not this time. Morning came slowly. The first light crept through the cracks in the wood, brushing against the girl's face. She stirred. Her eyes opened. Panic hit instantly. She tried to move, but pain shot through her body, forcing a broken gasp from her lips. Easy. The voice was low. Calm. She froze. Her eyes darted to the corner of the room, where the cowboy sat, watching. Fear filled her expression. Where am I? Safe. The word was simple. But she didn't believe it. Not yet. Who are you? He paused. Then shook his head slightly. Doesn't matter. It was the truth. Names didn't change what had already happened. Days passed. Slowly. Painfully. But something changed. The girl began to heal. Not quickly. Not completely. But enough to sit up. Enough to speak. Enough to start remembering. And that's when the silence broke. They said I was worthless. Her voice was quiet, but steady now. The cowboy didn't respond. They laughed when I begged them to stop. Still, he said nothing. They left me there to die. A pause. Then finally. They were wrong. She looked at him. For the first time, not with fear. But with something else. Confusion. Why did you help me? The question hung in the air. Heavy. Real. The cowboy leaned back slightly, his eyes distant for a moment. Because no one helped someone I should have saved. Her breath caught. That was the first crack. Not in her. In him. That night, the wind was quieter. The fire burned steady. And for the first time since she'd been found, she slept without fear. But far away, in a town that thrived on silence and cruelty, men began to notice something. A body that wasn't found. A girl who didn't die. And a trail in the dust. Leading somewhere, the quiet never lasts forever. For a few days, it felt like it might. The wind softened, the sky stretched clear and blue, and the small cabin at the edge of nowhere began to feel less like a hiding place, and more like something fragile, something almost human. The girl could stand now, barely, but enough to step outside and feel the sun on her face. Enough to breathe without fear tightening her chest every second. But peace in a world like this is never given. It's borrowed. And sooner or later, it gets taken back. It started with tracks. The cowboys saw them at dawn. Boot prints. Fresh. Not his. Not hers. 3 men. Maybe 4. Circling. Watching. Waiting. He didn't say anything at first. Just stood there, eyes scanning the horizon, jaw tightening in a way that hadn't happened in a long time. His hand rested near his holster, not out of fear, but out of memory. The kind of memory that never really leaves a man, no matter how far he rides. Inside, the girl noticed the change. You saw something, she said quietly. He didn't answer right away. Then, simply. They're coming. Her blood ran cold. She didn't ask who. She already knew. The kind of men who leave someone to die don't forget unfinished business. They come back. Always. That night, the air felt heavier. The fire crackled low, shadows flickering across the wooden walls like ghosts that refused to stay buried. The girl sat on the edge of the bed, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. I don't want to run anymore, she said. The cowboy looked at her. Really looked this time. You won't outrun them, he replied. I know. Her voice didn't shake. That was new. They took everything from me, my home, my name, my life. She swallowed hard. If I run now, they take what's left. Silence filled the room. Then the cowboy stood. Slow. Deliberate. Then we don't run. The next morning came with dust on the horizon. 4 riders. Just like he thought. They didn't rush. Didn't hide. Men like them never did. They rode like they owned the land, like fear walked ahead of them clearing the way. The girl stood beside the cabin door, her breathing steady but her heart pounding so loud it felt like it might break through her ribs. Her hands trembled. But she didn't step back. The cowboy stepped forward. Past her. Between her and them. The riders stopped a few yards away. One of them laughed. "Well, I'll be damned, she's still alive." Another spat into the dirt. "Told you she wouldn't last a day." The first man tilted his head, studying the cowboy. "And you must be the fool who picked her up." The cowboy didn't answer. Didn't move. Didn't blink. Something in that silence shifted the air. The laughter faded. Just a little. "She belongs to us," one of the men said, his tone hardening. The girl flinched behind the cowboy, but didn't hide. "Not this time." "No," the cowboy said. One word. Flat. Final. The men exchanged glances. Then the leader smiled, a slow, cruel smile that had ended lives before. "You don't understand how this works." The cowboy's hand hovered near his gun. "I understand enough." The first shot came fast. Too fast for words. But not too fast for him. The crack of the gun echoed across the plains as the first rider dropped from his horse, hitting the ground before his body even understood what had happened. The others reacted instantly. Guns drawn. Chaos. Dust exploded into the air as bullets tore through it, the sharp thunder of gunfire breaking the silence wide open. The girl stumbled back toward the cabin, her breath catching as she watched it unfold, fear clawing at her chest, but something else rising with it. Not helplessness. Not anymore. The cowboy moved like a man who had done this 100 times, and hated every single one. Precise. Controlled. Unstoppable. Another shot. Another man fell. The third tried to flank him, circling wide, but the cowboy was already turning, already firing. He didn't miss. He never did. And then there was one. The leader. Still on his horse. Still smiling. But now, there was something else in his eyes. Not fear. Not yet. But close. "You should have stayed out of this," he said, his voice lower now. The cowboy said nothing. The wind picked up. Carrying dust between them like a curtain. "You don't know who you're protecting," the man continued. "She's nothing." That was when the girl stepped forward. Her voice cut through the tension, clear, sharp, and stronger than it had ever been. "I'm not nothing." Both men looked at her. "I survived you." The leader's smile faded. Slowly. "You think that makes you strong?" She took another step. Closer. "I know it does." For the first time, the balance shifted. Not because of a gun. But because of her. The leader's hand twitched toward his weapon. That was all it took. The final shot rang out. And just like that. It was over. The dust settled slowly. The wind carried the silence back in. 4 men came. None left. The girl stood there, staring at the ground where it had ended. Her hands were no longer shaking. Her breathing was steady. But her eyes were different now. Stronger. Alive. "Is it over?" she asked quietly. The cowboy looked out across the empty plains. "Yeah," he said. "It's over." But he knew something she didn't yet. It wasn't just revenge. It wasn't just justice. It was something deeper. Something harder to name. Days passed again. But this time, it wasn't the same kind of quiet. It wasn't fear hiding beneath the surface. It was peace. Earned. Paid for. Real. The girl stood outside the cabin one evening, watching the sun sink into the horizon. "I don't want to be who I was before," she said. The cowboy leaned against the railing. "Then don't be." She looked at him. "What should I be?" He thought for a moment. Then said, "Someone who keeps going." She nodded. And for the first time, she smiled. Not because the pain was gone, but because it no longer owned her. A few days later, she packed what little she had. The world was still dangerous. Still uncertain. But it wasn't hers to fear anymore. It was hers to face. At the edge of the trail, she stopped. Turned back. "Are you coming?" The cowboy shook his head slightly. "This is your road." A pause. Then she stepped forward, and hugged him. It was brief. Unexpected. But real. "Thank you," she whispered. He didn't respond. Didn't need to. She walked away. Not broken. Not beaten. But reborn. The cowboy watched until she disappeared into the horizon. Then he turned back toward the cabin. Toward the quiet. Toward whatever came next. Because some men aren't meant to stay. They're meant to appear when the world turns cruel. And disappear when it learns to be kind again. And if this story moved you, if you believe in strength rising from pain, and justice finding its way back, don't forget to subscribe to the channel.